Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rose, and I am very happy to welcome here on this Aerotoxic Presentation evening. We are still expecting, as you see, a lot of people who are joining us tonight, so welcome. So, as you see already on the screen, let me first start with the logistics before I present myself. You can attend, we will do an online poll with your cell phone. You can use the QR code or the address with your cell phone. You will be asked a poll and questions, and you can ask even your own questions for this evening. And the password you will have to use to enter the poll is PULSE, which is P for Papa in big capitals, and the rest is just small letters. So PULS, PULSE. And you will see in between the lectures, I will present these questions, and you will see in the app there's a possibility to ask your own questions, and then all of the speakers will be able to answer your questions at the end of the night. Yes. So, for the ones who don't know me, you probably will ask, who is this person presenting this presentation? Well, 2 years and a half I met Dr. Mulder, which is here, and I met him at a retreat, nothing to do with aviation, and at the time I was searching for some answers concerning my health. And he introduced me into Aerotoxic Syndrome. And at the time, I haven't heard about that at all, I said to him. So he sent me some research papers, some documentaries to see, and I started to read into these materials, and I was really surprised and shocked, actually, about what I was finding in these lectures and these research papers and these documentaries. So, and then I asked him 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, I asked him, well, could you do a presentation? Because I think my colleagues need to know this. I didn't know, and I called a lot of colleagues, and they said, no, I've never heard about Aerotoxic syndrome. And at the time, this was already for years and for years going on in aviation. So I fell from one surprise into another, and then I decided to start an awareness campaign in the company I fly for. And it has been a journey, not always that easy, but I am very, I'm aware that this campaign is needed. And I'm very grateful that I am supported by my secretary of the union. I was asked to become a union member, and he has been a support, and he really needs. I want to thank him. I'm so very grateful for what he has been doing. He's my support. He's also sponsored this event, the room, and so on. Another sponsor that we have is ProHealth, is a laboratory. Some of the speakers will tell you about this laboratory, what they can do for you. And another sponsor, and that's our first speaker for tonight, is Rudy Pont from BeCa, the Belgian Cockpit Association, and they also sponsored this evening. And together with your tickets, the amount that we could gather with the tickets, we are able to pay the speakers who are doing this investigation, who are doing the research to bring this topic, excuse me, to bring this more awareness concerning this topic and to do more research. So, first of all, I would love to give the word to Paul Buckout, and he deserves a really big applause.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening. 2 years ago, like Rose already mentioned, 2 years ago we were in a small village between Leuven and Hasselt. It was a nice place, and there we had our first meeting with Dr. Mulder. And I was surprised. At that moment, I didn't know anything about Aerotoxic syndrome. So, and for me, it was an open view. Also, within the trade union, that trade unions must also take care of their security and of the safety of their people. And that's one of the points that we want to mention in our work, together with all the other organizations who want to give information about that this is an issue, and more and more it's an issue that it's under the table, because nobody wants to talk about it. So, and that is one of the first points of a trade union. If there is something that you don't want to talk, you must talk about it. Because this issue, and more about studying, also discussing, also in the air companies, to discuss in the committee, that we want to have a more transparent way about discussing and reflecting about this issue, about aerotoxic syndrome. And a second point that I ask also from trade union, it's also to the airplane companies that they ask to their constructor, because airplane is something that was constructed by a constructor, so that there will be transparency. And I compare, I worked 15 years for the Clean Clothes campaign with trade unionists. So the Clean Clothes campaign is, we have clothes who were made in acceptable working conditions. So I want to have also acceptable airplanes. And that's a job for a constructor. It's not a job for me, it's not a job for you, but the constructor must give us some very good airplanes. And that is also a point that we want to develop also on the level of the Ministry of Labour and Ministry of Social Welfare in Belgium. We are taking steps. It goes step by step. It's not easy, because this item is an item is very dangerous, I think. And you are not dangerous people. I think you are people who want to have some more information. And I hope this evening will be contributed to that. And now I give the floor to Ross.
So to start first with the first poll, we are going to do a little game. Just I want you to scan the code or go to attend.sl/BeCa. And I see that we have 2 attendees now, so take your cell phone, because we're going to do a voting now. So, and you only can vote if you are online. And there should be now, yes, let me check. 8 people are now online. 9 people. So everybody is checking in. So let's start with the first question. 11 people are checked in. So it should be now. Okay, we have some votes. People are still voting now. Joining online. Yes, please.
Sorry, is there maybe a Wi-Fi password here?
No, it's open network.
No, it's an open network, or you can do it via 4G. And the password is Pulse. So Papa, Uniform Lima S. Sierra. The big P, the capital P, yes. Okay, 15 people are attending, 16. Yes. Yes, 19 people have just joined. Okay. Doesn't work. You can do it anonymously, and you can join by name. If you join by name and you have a specific question later on, you will be able to, the speakers can answer you via email after the presentation. So if you do it anonymously, we cannot reach you. Okay, I've now 23. So a few more seconds. Okay. All right. Let's. A few more seconds. let's finish, and we are going to the results. So we have 90% complete degrees. So the speakers, please be aware of that when you explain. Some basic knowledge, some solid background, and experts. We have 10% of experts in the room. Okay. Right. Next question. So I see more people joining. And the next question you can vote now, if you want to attend. I see people voting. Okay. All right. Two more people need to vote. And we are going to finish off. So, how many people do we have here? Of flying staff, pilots, cabin crew, no medical staff, no other aviation staff, but we have press and other, and ex-crew due to illness, 12%. So, now I'm going to give the word to Rudy Pont and give a whole applause.
Kind of frightens me to see that there's no medical staff when we have 3 doctors that are speakers. So I'm a bit afraid of that. Anyway, welcome all, also in the name of the Belgian Cockpit Association on this evening, and thanks for taking your time off to come and attend this. Actually, my presentation just finished according to the schedule, so I'll try to make it quick. Thanks a lot for the support, fellow speakers. Let's dive in. Belgian Cockpit Association is the sole airlines pilots representation or professional association for pilots in Belgium. It is self-funded and we are politically independent. That means we are no union, so we don't have a color. Sometimes this is an advantage, sometimes it's also a disadvantage, but hey, that's the way it is. So that's how we do it. We represent about 640 pilots in Belgium in all different airlines. And we're actively involved also at European level and at international level, at global level, thanks to our affiliation with the European Cockpit Association and the Global International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations worldwide. To give you an idea, we have 640 people here in Belgium represented. We have about 40,000 in European Union, and we have more than 100,000 in 100 different countries at global level. People of IFALPA are also sitting together with the International Civil Aviation Organization, who draws up the standards and recommended practices that we all use in aviation. So, what is the objective, or are the objectives of our association? First of all, it's aviation safety. And this is exactly why I'm standing here in front of you today. This is really a safety topic, and we need to create a lot more awareness, as Paul said, about it. On the other hand, we also are the voice of our pilots here in Belgium on professional matters. That includes pension, working conditions, things like that. And that's where we try to provide technical expertise to our different stakeholders, among them obviously the unions. We're developing also unity among our pilots, and a prime example are the transnational pilot groups, for example for Ryanair, where we see that a lot of companies today now work internationally, they have different places, and so it's very difficult to do this on a national level, and we need to unite at, in this case, a European level. So, as the chairman of the Air Safety Committee, I try to monitor a number of different safety topics. This range from just culture, peer support programs, air traffic control, and obviously cabin air quality, which I will be talking to you today. You've seen this already for years, and I saw that some of the people indicated that they were green on the subject, but definitely you will have read some of the titles that are presented here. Either you saw maybe Zembla, a mission on television, in 2013. There was a follow-up in 2017, so you all know Dr. Mulder, who's here in the room. And you see that for the press, sometimes it's a big hype, and then everybody's there, and it's headlines in the papers, and then it kind of dwindles down. And then a few years later, all of a sudden, poof, there's a new documentary or something else is happening, and then it's a big attention for the topic, and then again it dwindles down. We need to get rid of that. We need to bring it really on the table, because it's here. You also see different websites popping up, associations. The Aerotoxic Association has been around for a pretty long time. Talking about the matter, you have associations in France that are quite aggressive on the topic. And also you see that a number of airlines start to invest in filtration of cabin air, something that was in the past really not heard of. So what are we exactly talking about if we're talking cabin air quality?
How can the air you breathe on an aircraft become contaminated? Most of the air entering a jet engine is used in the propulsion process. But on all aircraft except the Boeing 787, some of the air is sent off to the aircraft cabin and cockpit to allow the passengers en route to breathe and survive in flight. This air is known as bleed air. The bleed air should be the same quality as the air entering the engine, but due to engine sealing design, some of the synthetic oils in the engine will contaminate the breathing air. The amount of contamination may increase from continual low level on all flights to higher levels with seal wear or failure or inadequate maintenance. Unknown to most passengers and many crews is the fact that the bleed air is not filtered. Consequently, by design, the breathing air in the aircraft cabin and cockpit will, in varying degree, contain hazardous engine oil ingredients and their heated chemical byproducts. Hydraulic and de-icing fluids have also been found to contaminate the bleed air supply.
So, there we are. That's exactly what we're talking about today. We see two different things. We see on the one hand oil that enters, but there are a lot more substances that may enter the cabin air. We're talking also about de-icing, maybe hydraulic fluids, etc. But what we understand about cabin air quality or cabin air contamination, it's really about taking the bleed air of the engine and it enters the cabin with contamination. So why did they come up with this idea of taking the air from the engine, and why didn't they just take air from the outside? Well, as a matter of fact, before 1955, aircraft just took ram air, just plain air from the air it was flying through, and then compressed it and then put it into the aircraft to have pressurization. Around 1955, there's a Sud Aviation, French company that later resulted in Airbus, said that we can do it much more efficient if we take the air from the engine. So they built a Caravelle, and by 1972, the year that the Boeing 727 was introduced, if I'm not mistaken, actually all of the aircraft used this system, used this bleed air system. The problem is that this air that's going through the engine can be contaminated due to the design and wear of bearing seals or also improper maintenance. For example, if you overfill the oil, so the oil is when you top off the engine oil, they never take all of the oil out of the engine as you do with your car. It's always just topping off. So the oil goes somewhere. Normally it goes straight out of the back of the engine. Some of the oil might also end up in the cabin. Two different ways it can happen. Acute exposure, then we talk about fume events, so there's a high dose and a very limited amount of time, or chronically over time low doses. Okay. Problem is that people become sick because these oils or their substances are toxic. And I'm very well aware that my fellow speakers will explain you much more in detail what we're really talking about. For the time being, people become sick. The fact that the aerotoxic syndrome is not yet recognized as a medical term, 2 weeks ago there was a cabin air conference in London by the GCAQE, and actually it was a doctor that said, yeah, but it's quite logical because 20 years ago there were a lot of syndromes that weren't recognized, but nowadays they're in the books as well. So I don't think it's a valid argument. Anyway, Have a look at the timeline. This is a great document, by the way, created by Dr. Susan Michaelis. It's available on the GCAQE website, and it just draws a timeline of what happens. And you see that already in 1977, great year, by the way, there was the first incapacitation recorded due to this contamination. By the way, on the line just above 1970, you will see that cockpit warning systems were already required by federal aviation regulations in the United States. So the design of the aircraft stated, or the requirement stated, that there needed to be some sort of a monitoring. 1970, people, we're 2019, end of 2019, it's still not there. So, people become sick. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a really big problem for the industry because they face, obviously, an enormous litigation. They're afraid that legal cases will be built against their industry, manufacturers, but also airlines, not only crews, but also passengers and traveling public. And so you can imagine that this can amount to enormous amounts of money. Well, we've seen all of this before. We've seen all of this before. And these are just two examples, smoking and asbestos. And I always use this example. I think if you told somebody 25 years ago that they couldn't use the curved plates anymore to put on their garden house, then they would have laughed with you. And nowadays, if there's somewhere one fiber of asbestos which is discovered, then they put a circle around the whole area, and nobody is allowed to enter because it's too big. So we've seen all of this before, and it's called corporate deniability. So this is what we're talking about. Problem is that the industry obviously denies that there's a problem, they minimize the risk, obviously in the sight of, or in view of this litigation risk, and so passengers and crew continue to be exposed. This is the big picture. Because we're always talking about either airlines or what should they do, whatever, but it's a really big picture. On the one hand, obviously, start with us. This is me, by the way. It's, when I have my mustache. You have the general traveling public here. Obviously, you have the airlines that they use. The airlines buy aircraft from the manufacturers, and these manufacturers, by themselves, have OEMs. So original equipment manufacturers, and those are actually the people, I just named a few, it's really not complete, I just named a few that are actually delivering the systems to the aircraft manufacturers, which they do use. On the other hand, you have politics. I wanted to put orange hair, but I didn't. And you also have the authorities. And this is really the interchange between all of these different players. Because obviously, we say there is a problem, but if we say to the airlines are squeezed in between the manufacturers and us. But we have a little voice. We're only a few. So, if there's not really, if the airlines aren't convinced that this is really a problem, what is the power we have? Not much. Obviously, this will change if we can convince the general public that there's really an issue. And this meeting tonight is exactly one of those items. If we can convince the general public, probably the politicians will start to listen. And let's hope that the authorities also start to listen, and we can convince the airlines to put pressure on the manufacturers, and they can put pressure, or they can choose other OEMs to deliver their systems. That's basically the way I see a way out of this. What do we do as Belgian Cockpit Association? We have a number of stakeholders meeting in which we are participating. First of all, we're an active member of the GCAQE, the Global Cabin Air Quality Executive, which is basically an organization that unites all of the sub-organizations that are involved in this problem or this issue. Next, we're also very active. We're actually chairing the Cabin Air Quality Working Group at ECA level, the European Cockpit Association level, where we exchange expertise with our other member associations, being Vereniging Cockpit or Luxembourg or BALPA or whatever. Next, we also sit around the table with airlines. And especially here in Belgium, we're trying actively, obviously together in cooperation with the ACP, to bring really change to what's going on. We're also in contact with the Belgian civil aviation authorities, and actually also with Professor Rudy from the KU Leuven, to get in place some kind of a standardized medical protocol. I will talk about that in a minute. And most importantly, we're already since 2015 part of the European Committee for Standardization, which is basically the organization that tries to set up standards for cabin air quality in a meaning, and it's divided in 4 different working groups. First one, how to detect, because what are ways to detect it? It's not always easy. Second, what is the concentrations? The first one also implies that you know what you're going to detect, because there's sometimes also confusion about what we really try to measure. What are the concentrations, at what levels things really become toxic, because that's not always clear. How to counteract, so what can we do to solve the problem if it's there, and how to train people. That's basically it. The problem with this is that it's very political, because everybody's there. Also the manufacturers, also the people that produce the oil that's used in the engines, and obviously they have all their own interests. So we see that this is really almost stalling. It's really advancing very slowly, but we keep the seat warm. We have a mandate from the Belgian standardization office, or norm, Belgian norm I should say, and we do our best to change things, but it's really going slow. And then last but not least, obviously also politics on politic level, and Paul mentioned it already, we're trying to do our best to change things. So, on the same document you saw earlier, you see here that since 2015, this European organization is also working on standardization. So, how do we see it? What are our objectives? Well, we think creating awareness is the first step. And it's creating awareness at all different levels. So think again about the slide just before. We want to do it about the general public needs to know about this, crews need to know about this, obviously airlines also didn't mention it, but it's definitely true, but normally they will be aware because they push it away a little bit because it's really difficult to handle. Authorities and politics, and obviously the industry level in general. How? Once we've created this awareness, we want to make sure that if crews are aware, that they report in a standard manner. Because you wouldn't believe how many reports are just almost lost in translation. People report it, but there's no central repository, there's no detailed way of gathering all of this data, and definitely on the medical side. So what will happen, also in Belgium, but in a lot of neighboring countries as well, people will have a fume event, they will become sick, they will go to a doctor, who most of the time will not know what to do, and then they go home. And so this report, maybe it's kept on the airline level, but at the airline level, but that's very exceptional, but normally nothing happens. And so all of this data that we gather is just lost. And that's definitely unacceptable. If there's an issue, you really need to measure before you can know what you have to do. So first of all, we need to get the standardized medical protocol and standardized reporting. Some people will say, yeah, but we have it, there's mandatory occurrence reporting for fume events. Yes, that's true, but I still need to see the results of that. And last but not least, once we have the reporting, then we have a body of evidence which we can use in future research. And that's definitely needed. On health effects, on detection and standardization, and on technical solutions. Once we know what to work on, then we can move on. So, what do we see as a solution? Well, on the short term, early detection. Let's talk about sniffers. Let's see what we can detect. There are already some things on the market. Pal Aerospace is working on a detector as well. Lufthansa has a system, although it's not really clear what they're actually measuring, but at least there is detection equipment, and we should go forward on that. Swabbing, so taking samples out of the aircraft to see, and to see really what's going on, what substances are there, and also CO, carbon monoxide. I mentioned because it's in the CS25, which is a certification specification for the design of the aircraft. Actually, we should have carbon monoxide detectors on board. There's actually no aircraft that have it. Really strange, but it's true. Filters, less toxic oils, is definitely a possibility, I think. A lot of people I talk to, I'm an engineer by degree, And I think if there is an issue, we should be able to solve it. I really believe in the human spirit and our technical abilities. I definitely believe that we can find solutions for it. Proper maintenance action after fume events. Also at the conference 3 weeks ago, we had presentation with Icelander and TAP, Portugal, and both of the companies said what we really lack is some sort of a procedure where we really know where to look and what we can do. We have a procedure, but it's taking a lot of work because of the complexity of the air conditioning system. If we have to clean it, we have to keep the aircraft on the ground for 2 days, and obviously there's a lot of commercial pressure to let the airplane fly. So definitely we also need a push or a commitment from the airlines to take their jobs seriously and to make sure that once an aircraft has had a fume event, that the cleaning and that the aircraft is completely fine once we can fly again with it. It's impossible that there would be even a smell or a hint of a smell in an aircraft and then people are forced to fly with that. But these are things that are happening nowadays. Proper medical screening, that's what we said. I think Professor Dr. Mulder will talk about poor detoxifiers and good detoxifiers, I really hope. And on the long term, obviously everybody agrees that there should be bleed-free aircraft, which by the way, for the people that have indicated green, Boeing 787 doesn't use a bleed air system, but uses ram air. In short, the summary, aerotoxic syndrome is a reality. We are beyond the time where we're still discussing whether this was an issue or it's not an issue. That's done. There are more than 100 academic research papers that have been written on the syndrome. It's here. Now is the thing, what do we need to do to solve it? So, for the people that are not convinced, if there is a problem, we should apply the precautionary principle, which says that if you think there might be a problem, well, at least make sure that you don't make it any worse and try to understand, don't expose people to more harm if you're not sure. That's basically it. We should overcome the denial reflex. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, definitely not. And we've seen this the last 5 to 10 years, but it's definitely now the time to act and to get our heads out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Let's do another poll. So I hope you take out your cell phones again. And this is actually especially for airline crew. And you can vote no. If you need the password and you are too late, it is Pulse, capital P-U-L-S, so uniform, Lima, Sierra. Okay, so let's check. Still, yes. Still 7 people need to vote. Okay, and we are going to wrap up. I see still more people joining. Okay, and let's see. 62% have been involved in a cabin air quality event. That's more of half the people here in the room. So that's a lot of people. Okay, let's do the next question. So, also for these people who had a report of an event, so was your cabin crew event reported? Yes? No? I'm not sure. Okay, people are voting. Still more 5 seconds. Alright, I'm going to finish up now. Show the results. Yes, 50%, so 1 and 2 is not reported. 23% I'm not sure. So for the people who are not flying, sometimes a cabin crew reports a few event or a small event to the cockpit, and sometimes it's not reported by the cockpit. So, and maybe there is some more awareness needed amongst the cabin crew and the flight crew, and 27 said it's not reported. Yes. So let me check the next question. And then after cabin crew cabin air quality event, did you receive medical support and sufficient info? So just do your votes now. 2 more seconds. And we'll go and show the... So yes, but not enough medical support and information. No, I was not aware of the health risks, and none. So that says it all. A lot of people don't know about the health risks of flying. And the next questions we will do after the presentation of Dr. Mulder. Give him a warm applause.